Paula, you're muted.
Who is, oh, there.
Okay, can you guys hear me? No, not you guys. You guys on Zoom.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. Just one or two little housekeeping things, and then we'll get started. If you haven't had a chance to see our brand new revised website, do take a look. We put a lot of time and effort into making it much easier to navigate and we hope prettier. So that was a big project that we did this year. If you haven't already registered for the California Crime Writers Conference next June, the cheap prices will expire in December. Cheap is probably an exaggeration. The hotel prices were much, much higher this year than they were in 2019. So we made things as low as we possibly could so that we would at least break even and have money to put back in our checking account. But if you're planning to go, it's a good idea to register before the end of December. And we have some really interesting workshops and panels for you, which will eventually be on the website, which Anne, our former president, is running. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Bobby, our program director, who's going to introduce our reader for today, Nancy Silverman.
Hi, everybody. Let me announce. Today, our reader is Nancy Silverman. Nancy spent 25 years in beginning her career on the talent side as one of the first female voices on the air. Later, she moved over to the business side and retired as the 2 female general managers in the nation's second largest radio market. After a successful career in radio, she then started writing fiction. Nancy writes 2 series. One is the Carol Childs mystery, and the others is the Misty Dawn series. She's going to read today from The Navigator's Daughter. So help me welcome Nancy.
Thank you, Bobby. It's nice to be here. And this is the first book in my new series, The Navigator's Daughter, which I will tell you was inspired by my father, who passed away 3 years ago. And when I was going through his things, I found that he had been a former navigator bombardier for the 781st Bomb Squadron out of Bari, Italy. And I found his notes because he had been shot down. Back then, about 50% of the B-24 crews did not come back. So my father was shot down. My mother gets a yellow notice from the Department of Defense saying lost, missing in action. And my father spent 3 weeks in Hungary. So when I'm going through his file cabinet, I find his notes. I found his diary. I found his flight log. So it inspired, you know, this mystery writer, it inspired my my new novel, the new series, the Cat Lawson series, and this is it, The Navigator's Daughter. So this is in memory of the 781st, and to you, Dad, thank you. So chapter 1, Tuesday, July 16th, 1996, Phoenix, Arizona. My father called before 10 a.m. I remember because he said he had just been to the mailbox, and the mail at the senior center comes early before their summer sun has a chance to sear the desert floor and the July temperatures begin to climb into triple digits. Today's forecast was for 113, but Phoenicians say it's a dry heat and the locals don't seem to mind. Oh, they found my playing cat. Dad sounded like a kid at Christmas, not unusual for him. He was always upbeat, at least before the cancer had zapped him of his strength and left him living with an oxygen tank, a former shell of himself. The B-24? I was skeptical. The one you bailed out of more than 50 years ago? My dad and I are close. I've always had a kind of sixth sense about him. Growing up, I had heard the story at least a dozen times of how he had jumped out of his plane, or the PG version anyway. I couldn't imagine any other aircraft that he would have been so excited about. I have a letter. You need to see it, Kat. Your mom's gone. She's got to get her hair done, and there's something I want to show you. Come by. I'll make coffee. Dad, don't give me any crap about chasing some story, Kat. It's not like you're working for the newspaper anymore. And if you're planning to meet up with that ex-husband of yours, that's a total waste of time. He's not my ex-dad, at least not yet anyway. I bristled at the thought. Difficult as things had been with Josh, I still hated to admit failure. My folks have been married 55 years, and I had barely managed 3. Get yourself over here, will you? No excuses. You'll understand when I'll show you why. It's important, something you're going to need to see to believe. I had a dozen reasons why I didn't want to stop at my parents' condo that morning. The very least was that I had an appointment with both the pool man and the gardener that Josh had forgotten to pay. And I had a call back for a job interview that afternoon with a small startup newspaper that I knew wouldn't amount to anything. Not once they learned that I had been let go from my previous position for what the paper called an inappropriate relationship. In my opinion, the only thing inappropriate about the relationship was that the paper had fired me and not my boss. He was Teflon, a name they needed to keep, and me, well, not so much. Even worse, the Phoenix Gazette, where I'd worked, was owned by the only other paper in town, the Arizona Republic. And with my now sullied reputation, I had little hope anyone in the city would hire me. But for whatever it was worth, I still needed to make an effort and follow through with the interview. My personal life had fallen apart. Dad was dying. My mother was in a deep state of denial. And since I was the only child to take care of my parents, it was up to me. Dad was sitting on the patio when I arrived. I could see his rounded shoulders with his head bowed and from above the low wall that faced the walkway. He looked up and I waved as I approached. Don't get up, Dad. I went around to the front door and let myself in. The smell of burnt coffee permeated their small apartment. I unplugged the pot and poured myself half a cup. Want any? I already had some. Dad stood up in the patio door, shaky, a portable oxygen tank at his side and a large manila envelope in his hand. Getting too hot out there anyway. I nodded to the dining room. How about we sit inside? I waited while Dad shuffled across the room and folded his thin, frail frame into the cane-back chairs. You're not going to believe this, Kat. Look what I got in the mail today. Dad took out a weathered strip of aluminum and laid it on the table. Know what this is? I had no idea. Piece of skin from my plane. Old girl must have glided in after we bailed out. Letter here's from a guy who says he found her in Tomasai, Hungary. What guy? I don't know. Some Hungarian guy named Sandor Zalinger. Says he's a researcher. Been looking into the remains of old downed warplanes since he was a kid. Seems my plane landed in pretty good shape. He was able to give the tail numbers to the DOD and they matched it up with their records and well, here it is. The idea some stranger was writing to my dad, trying to convince him that after 50 years, he had found the remains of his B-24 seemed more than a little far-fetched. My reporter's instinct kicked in. The last couple of assignments I had with the Gazette had dealt with seniors who had been ripped off by grifters and artists, con artists who didn't care if they took a senior's last dollar. To my mind, this smacked of the same, and I wasn't about to sit back and watch my father be victim. I don't know, Dad. This all feels a little sketchy, don't you think? I knew you'd say that, but look at this. From within the envelope, my father took out 2 pieces of paper. The first was a typed letter from Sandor, and the second, a yellow piece of newsprint dated March 3rd, 1945. This is from the local paper in Tomasai, the day after we bailed. I couldn't read the headlines or the paper story since they were written in Hungarian, but a black and white photo of a downed and partially demolished B-24 had caught my father's eye. He was convinced that the bomber that lay belly flopped in the field was the same plane he and his crew had bailed out of that fateful day. I picked up the metal strip my father believed to be part of the plane. For all I knew, the scarred piece of metal I held in my hand could have been cut from a can of lima beans the week before and doctored up to look like a dark scrapings and what looked like maybe a bullet hole. My father didn't think so. Okay, Dad, so let's say this is real. Of course it's real, Kat. Dan slammed his hat on the table. An unusual reaction for a man who seldom raised his voice. Why else do you think I'd call you here? There's a story here, and I need you to go and find out what happened. And that's the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The only bad thing is that you get us hooked to these books and then we hate to see you leave. We want them to turn the page. Our next speaker is going to be Laurie Stevens. Laurie was so gracious to accept my invitation. One of my speakers I had to cancel out. I'm going to start getting complex if they keep canceling out. But Laurie was very gracious, and we're really very lucky to have her. So I appreciate it. Laurie is the author of the Gabrielle McRae thriller novels, a series that's won 12 awards. Laurie's latest, In Twilight Hush, was named to Killers Nashville's top 6 books of 2021, as well as the Kindle's top 10 mystery thrillers of 2021. In regard to writing thrillers, Thriller Suspense magazine says Laurie is the leader of the pack. Boy, that's a really good compliment. While international thriller writers claim she's cracked the code of writing psychological suspense, today Laurie's talk is called Putting the Paranormal in the Thriller Without Putting Off Your Thriller Fans. Laurie?
First of all, didn't Nancy do great? Let's get, yay, Nancy. I've known Nancy from our Sisters in Crime on the board days. Yeah, and your book sounds fantastic. I will be getting it. And I also want to thank Paula and Bobby. You guys are doing a great job. Ex-President Ann over there too. It's good to be back. I don't think I've ever been to this venue, and we have a nice venue. So all you people on Zoom, come on in. Be physical. All right, today, that was such a nice introduction about psychological suspense and thrillers. And I do have a series out that is pretty much a die-hard, edge of your seat, page turning kind of thing. But when I decided to insert the paranormal elements into it, I was worried that I would lose some of my thriller fans. I think of my father-in-law. I got to count him among, why not, family. And he's a nonfiction reader. He devours 2 books a week. And he'll go to espionage thrillers for fiction, and he'll go to crime thrillers as well. So I always think of him as someone I want to please, or something that, I want to make sure I don't alienate. And I'll give you a little brief background of what my suspense series is about. It centers on a homicide detective for the LA County Sheriff's Department named Gabrielle McRae. And he suffers from PTSD, no surprise there, a lot of them do. But he was molested as a child, so he's carrying male sexual abuse around with him. And at the time that I was first doing the research for this, nobody wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Things have come a long way since then. The gist of the series is that it follows his psychological healing process. So I did a lot of research with psychologists. I read a lot of books that they gave me and made sure that the therapy was true to life. No paranormal there, everything straight ahead. So each book functions much like a parallel investigation. He's solving a crime, which, by the way, will trigger whatever point he's at in his psychological recovery. And he's also learning more about himself and healing himself as he goes along. So the first 3 books center on his journey, and he goes from victim to survivor pretty successfully, because this is a character that wants to heal himself. By the time I got to the 4th book, I thought, what would I want to do that's different? And as a writer, I always like to challenge myself. I tried a legal thriller in the 3rd book. By the time I got to the 4th book, I wanted to go a little off the rails. And I thought, a guy that becomes a survivor, the next step may be that he becomes an enlightened man, and maybe a detective that starts using some intuition that he didn't know he had before. And I thought, if I wanted to explore that, I'm going to make this somewhat paranormal. And then I thought of my father-in-law, and I went, he's going to open this book up, see ghost, and go, good job, Laurie. Liked your first 3. And then that's it. And I thought, so how can I do this without alienating my thriller fans, the people that don't believe in all the hocus pocus and they don't want to see it and they would normally never pick up a book like that. And that's what I'm going to share with you today is, like that book, How I Did It, or didn't OJ write a book called How I Did It, or I Didn't Do It, or whatever. Okay, so the first thing is I decided to do was put it in a, create a setting. Can you still hear if it's over here? Okay. I wanted to create a setting that would be believable, but Gothic. Something that would introduce the creepy without someone just going, I don't want to read about a haunted house, something like that. So for me, the best bet was to put him on a cold case, because right off the bat, cold cases have brittle, dried up evidence. They have detectives who have long since passed away. They have witnesses that maybe were once kids at the time and now are burdened adults. I thought the possibilities would be endless with that. So he works a cold case that takes place about a missing girl named Nancy Lewicki, who went missing in 1988. It's a very old case at this point. I mean, I remember 1988 quite well. And that was also fun for me because I would also be able to interject some stuff that I remembered from my youth, clothes, things like that, that I could bring in. I was very excited about writing a cold case. And I based it on a Dateline NBC called Disappearance at the Dairy Queen, about a Cindy Zarzicki. And I kind of took that cold case and made my character solve it. It eventually was solved, by the way. And so you start off with a believable but Gothic setting. You don't put them right in a haunted house, but you introduce something like a cold case. So now you're dealing with things of the past. Sort of opens the door. Then I thought, well, if he just starts seeing ghosts and he believes in ghosts, every one of my thriller fans is going to call BS on that and put it away. So I had to make Gabriel what I call the beloved skeptic. You have a character that people already identify with, and they like him. So they're not going to want to put him away. They're already following his story. So you don't necessarily want this person, your character, to become a believer overnight. And so basically, he starts getting nudges, like he dreams of skeletons and water, and he gets woken up at the same time every night, 3:15. But if you know Gabriel at all, and because of his past and what he suffered through, that he needed therapy, he just starts thinking his mind is coming apart again. So when he starts getting these little subtle nudges from other worlds, he's not really buying it. So he is the beloved skeptic. But if you keep someone who's just skeptical and you're introducing all these supernatural elements in a subtle way, your story's not going to go anywhere. So that's when I had to introduce another aspect. And what I did, not copying from Misty Dawn, of course, but I introduced a psychic. And the thing about this Nancy Lewicki case is that while the evidence is buried somewhere, her parents are still alive, and Gabriel feels very sorry for them because they've had years after year after year of wondering where their daughter is and never knowing. So he really wants to solve this case for them, and they insist that he work with a psychic. And unfortunately, she is a psychic to the stars, this being LA. And that also drives him insane because he's a down-to-earth, nature lover, rugged guy. And now he has to deal with this very show-offy, egotistical woman who's going through her journey in the book as well. And she plays a pivotal role. But through her, I could bring out all the supernatural elements I wanted because she's a new character. My readers aren't identifying or attached to her. And I was lucky that they all liked her because I thought this could go either way. And what was interesting is I had her basically like the Sixth Sense. She's seeing dead people. But I thought if she's able to solve the case, then that lessens Gabriel. I can't have, Gabriel still has to be the superstar here. So what I did was I made her very important, but not so important. Are we okay? Oh, okay. Okay. Anyways, this is what happens as you get older, lose your train of thought. The psychic's name is Carmen. And if I gave her the ability to solve the case, there would be no story anymore. So I wanted to circle it back to Gabriel somehow. So what I did is I made her be able to see a ghost, but the ghost has very little to do with the case except sort of indirectly. And the clues that she's able to give Gabriel just circle back to him again. And the other way that I solved it was I have her tell Gabriel, Nancy is reaching out to you, not to me. You just have to open up your mind enough to see the signs. And that gave an extra added aspect because he doesn't believe her at all, but there is a part of him that's nagging about it. And basically, to tie it up at the end, he's a disbeliever all the way through, and that gave the thriller readers a way out. They didn't have to agree with the psychic and everything that she's been seeing, and she's been seeing dead bodies and all this stuff, and all the stuff that I happen to like about horror books I was able to put in. But at the end, I had something endearing happen to Gabriel. It's at his wedding, he's getting married, and he takes a walk by himself for a little bit. And I won't be a spoiler and give it away, but something happens that is still subtle, but it's endearing. And he chooses at that moment to believe it because he wants to believe it. And now he's become an enlightened man, which is what I wanted him to be from the beginning. And that opened up the door for me if I choose to write the future books. They might all be cold cases, and they might involve this psychic Carmen, who by now they've formed a begrudging friendship. And that's basically it. So in recap, if you're going to do something like that and you're going to switch genres, remember to do it subtle, have a beloved skeptic, have someone who embraces the paranormal wholeheartedly, and then give them the payoff at the end, which is the skeptic actually is not maybe quite 100%, but wants to. And that's it. I'd love to take any questions anybody has about switching genres or, yeah. The question is, can they hear the question? Did I struggle with the switching of genres? How long did I struggle with it? I didn't struggle that long. There was something, call it my sixth sense, that told me that this is where I really wanted to go. I don't know why I would have inserted a ghost in a series like this. It's straight ahead psychological suspense, other than the fact that maybe I would want to drive Gabriel crazy. But I just, I didn't have to struggle with it that long, Nancy. It just, something about a cold case and ghosts and stuff, it just seemed to just fit right in there. So I knew where I was going to go. I was just afraid, though. I was afraid that someone like my father-in-law would call BS on it and put the book down. He didn't. He liked it a lot. Yeah. So, yeah, Jody.
So are you thinking about, since you're opening up the cold case, are you thinking about a fifth book?
I've been told to write a fifth book. I wasn't going to. I was gonna, let's leave it at an enlightened man and tie the whole series up with a bow and move on. But now, when I think about cold cases and unsolved cases and cases from a long time ago, I mean, you could go anywhere with this. You could go 1800s with this. And if you're talking about a psychic and a detective, I don't know if any of you remember, but many, many years ago, before probably all of you were born, there was a show called, I think it was called The Sixth Sense, and it was about a detective that works, but he's also psychic. And he was very straight ahead talking to ghosts to help solve his case. But this would be a little different. Gabriel would have to remain the beloved skeptic to a certain extent. And maybe that mind would creak open just a little bit as time went on. So yes, Anne.
When you talk about beloved skeptic, which is, I love the concept. How do you maintain that, I guess? Is this something you can maintain? And maybe if you want to apply, say, a paranormal spin on something else that maybe isn't part of suspense.
Are you thinking of Sid in your books?
No, he would never.
You never know.
Well, there's things I know about it that you don't. So.
Guess you'll have to write it. The question is, the question is,
how do you maintain that?
how do you maintain, if you have a beloved skeptic, how do you maintain it?
I know what I was thinking. I'm sorry, I phrased it badly. Is this a good, how do you, it's an element now.
Yeah.
You got it. If you maintain it, is this something you're going to be able to use over and over and over again, or how are you going to do that?
I would think it just depends. I mean, oh, yes. How would you, if you introduce a beloved skeptic and you're now introduced the paranormal into your thriller series, how do you maintain that? You're going to have to write book after book after book about ghosts, or what are you going to do? I think I would just probably play that by ear and see where the series is going and where his capacity as a character is going and what he's going through. Like, for instance, in the book, I set up that his nemesis is going to escape from where he's being remanded, where he's going to be serving time. I may want to concentrate on that. I don't know that I'd bring a ghost in, but I would most likely have the psychic stay in and help in some way. Yeah, she became a popular character. Yeah.
Questionable as to whether she's a Sunday, because that could insulate never having to believing in ghosts or anything like that.
That's a good question. The question is, would you leave the psychic? Would there be a question as to whether she was really a psychic? Because then that leaves you free to not be in paranormal territory. Because it would leave you free to not be completely in paranormal territory. I think you should go all in, because I think that would start driving people, the readers, crazy. It's like, are you going to commit or are you not going to commit? Is this going to be, that's why if you have a psychic, she can be all in. She doubts her own abilities for a while in the book. And he doubts her all the way because she's showy and egotistical. And she has a show on TV and he thinks she's full of it. But she ends up giving him good clues.
Convincing himself that she's very perceptive. And she thinks she's psychic. He doesn't believe that. He just thinks that she picks up on things. And therefore, he can accept that she's useful to him, even though he thinks she's nuts.
That's one way to play it. I mean, you could write that book and then and have it that way. He does think she's nuts a little bit, but more than that, he thinks she's pandering, trying to get famous. And that bothers him more than anything. And even if she does give him a clue, like she asks him, what's expensive? And he says, what are you talking about? And she says, I'm getting that something's expensive, like, and she tries to make a joke out of it. Did you just buy a wristwatch, a new car? And he thinks she's talking about his wedding, which is becoming very expensive and too extravagant for his taste, which is another subplot. But what she's really talking about is something that is very key, something that triggered something in 1988. And it does circle back to that. And when he discovers it, it's a receipt that he finds among the dead girl's things. And he just, anyways, he looks at it and he does think at some point, this is expensive. And then he remembers what she said and he figures that's a clue. And so it's really him doing gumshoe detective work, but she's adding things in that draw his mind there. Plus he's getting his own nudges that he's ignoring, but they're very strong. And then at the end, they do, when he trusts his instincts finally, that's when he discovers something that basically solves the case. Oh, you mean, did I read all the Misty Dawn series? Well, the question is, how did I research the psychic phenomena? Did I go to psychics? I admittedly have been to psychics. I know how they work a little bit. And the rest, you know, I kind of made up. I didn't go interview. I think we had a psychic once at a Sisters in Crime, and I might have emailed her just to get some information. But you can kind of make up stuff like that as you go along. I tend to think we all have sort of a sixth sense around us anyhow. And all you have to do is dig deep and you'll find it. But no research like that.
Laurie, I have a question for you from Betsy Barker. How do you transition between the sleuth time?
Oh, you mean like back in 1988? The question is, how do you transition from the sleuth's present day time back to 1988? Okay, well, that's a good question. What I did was basically have Gabriel be trying to discover things, going, and then every so often he'll sit back and he'll daydream, but he'll daydream about a car that looks like a 1980s car. And he sees a bag of groceries get pushed into the car and a man sitting there, but he can't see the man. So there's things like that. So I drop clues to the reader that way, but they don't seem to make much sense. Make sure that whatever threads you put in your book, you circle back and you tie all of them up. If there was a bag of groceries being pushed into a car, that's got to appear later on. I don't like when writers don't do that. Anyways, but how I brought back the 1988 was through her diary, which is kind of a cheat, I admit it, but diaries from, especially old little collapsible diaries written in a girl's fine hand, they can do a lot. They can be very useful. And he gets into her mind through her diary. Anything else? Yes. I used a keyword paranormal for it. It was the first time I would have ever put that kind of keyword on the series. The question was, how would you categorize this book? If you have paranormal elements in it, put a keyword paranormal. If there's some romance in it, put paranormal romance. Although those readers are going to think you're talking about ghosts in love. So be careful. You know, the romance isn't between two ghosts. Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah, wasn't there a TV show called Medium where some cops kind of believed her and some didn't, but they respected?
Yes.
Some people you can respect that maybe there is. Show called Medium.
The question is, there was a TV show called Medium, and I liked that show. It was a blonde medium, right? A woman? What was her name?
Yeah.
Patricia. Okay. Yeah, I remember watching like a documentary about a medium, and she does help cops, but it's like what my character says in the book. He tells the psychic, when she says, "You're intuitive and you have the ability, you should explore it." He says, "Carmen, I'm a homicide detective. If I had any kind of ability to talk to the dead, I would have the #1 solve rate in the country, and I don't." So how much can mediums help? That's why I made her very subtle. I mean, she's seeing dead people, but the clues that she's given him are not, "Hey, I saw Nancy the other day and she said she's buried there and this happened." So you have to be careful. It's how you want to play it. I didn't want someone to end up laughing at this book. So I wanted to handle it with a lot of, just very delicately. Just put everything, yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, when I read your book, I have to say that the word paranormal did not really go through my head. I mean, the scientist that I am, I just thought that this is a man who's enormously experienced and smart and is maybe not aware of the clues he's picking up, but his subconscious mind is busy working when he's asleep or whatever, and giving him clues that I suppose you could interpret as paranormal, but So I think you were so subtle about it in this particular book, even though you did have a psychic, that you could go either way on your next book. You have to decide.
Yeah, the question is, well, there wasn't a question, it was a comment. But to your point that you said, in this book, it was very subtle, the clues, it could go either way. It could be the subconscious, his subconscious opening up. But Carmen, the psychic, she definitely sees a dead guy with half his head off in the book. And she has thousands of watchers, viewers, I guess hundreds of thousands. It's a very popular TV show in the book. So they do, if she says, "I saw a person with half his head off," they'll believe her. And I think that's pretty paranormal. I mean, I thought that part wasn't too subtle, but is there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for having me and letting me speak today. Appreciate it. Take care. Thank you. Oh, can I just say one more thing? I gave each of you talk about paranormal. I guess I am going into paranormal a little bit. I'm writing something on Kindle Vella, and I don't know if any of you know about Kindle Vella. It's the way that writers can write on a serialized platform. And it definitely hones your skills as writers. It keeps you on task where you have to upload a chapter. If it's a chapter a day, chapter a week, chapter a month, but you got to do it and it keeps you on your toes. And I left you all a bookmark and I invite you to go on the QR code, check it out as a writer to see if it's something you'd want to do. And also, if you do check it out, the first 3 episodes are free. That's the demand of Kindle Vella. So you can read them. And if you like them, please like it. Thank you so much.
Both Nancy and Laurie brought some books, and if you'd like some signed copies, I encourage you to go browse. I've read all of Laurie's series and it's fabulous, and I've read a great many books of Nancy's, and she's also fabulous, so I can vouch for both of them. They're a great read. Thank you all for coming, and enjoy yourselves. There's refreshments in the back.
Nice job. Thank you.
Oh, I bet. Yes. I mean, well, or it could be done in the setup could be done in the afternoon, and we could do the party in the evening. I don't know. I mean, we could ask. I mean, the day before would probably be a Saturday. They might have their own. They may. I mean, I don't know what their holiday schedule is, but I mean, I could ask. I just, there's no point in asking unless we get a commitment. But you know what? It can't hurt for me to ask Travis if they would be willing to plan the joint party this year. And that we could use, I could arrange for us to use our venue. I mean, I think yeah, and I mean, it could be catered, and we could, split the bill. I'm happy to do that. I just want to. I'm glad you like it. I spent weeks working with Lindsay. She was so great. I don't know my way around the website at all. I'm like a real techie. My magic power is organizing things. So I really had a good sense of what to connect to what. And I think it's pretty easy to navigate. Thank you. Lindsay said so. Hello, darling. Have you seen her new website? Yes, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. I was just telling Sherry that I'm technical. And I'm really not that technical. I mean, of course, you gotta understand. My friends work at JPL, so that's the. It does help to have help. Yes, I'm working on disconnecting things here. Yeah, and I was just saying, maybe I should email Travis and say, we planned the party our joint party every year for years. How about you guys plan it maybe, and we'd be happy to provide the venue. Yeah. Oh, okay. And well, I'm hoping to hear. It's been 24 hours. And you'll bring the wine. Because I haven't been invited. Being. Yeah, well, no, I have to respect whatever boundaries they set. And I think they were really clear that they wanted to do this themselves, settle in with their new baby, and then have their parents come and not have us, pay. And plus, hospitals don't let you in now because of that. I get I mean, if she was in labor at Cedars, that would be different. Well, yes, that can be a plus or a minus. Yeah. That's okay. I'll let you guys know. Will you let me know? It's going to be all right, darling. I will. Look, she's not giving birth to the 19th century. No, I know. I'm sure it'll be fine. It's so funny. I've had so many patients make a birth plan, and I always just smile when they do it, and I think to myself, do you think the baby's going to cooperate with your birth plan? They're practicing being teenagers. No, not a chance. Man plans, God laughs. So, I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised if she's be wound up with a C-section. But we'll see. It's not, and she's in good hands. She already knows how to do her. Right, how to push. No, it's not Danny, it's Danny's wife, right? Yeah, Rachel's the one who's pregnant. Right. And so it's Danny's egg, so it's actually our genetic grandchild, which I am incredible. Laurie, your book, I just want you to know how wonderful your books are. I mean, you are an exceptional writer. I mean, I have read all of them. Yeah, I guess so. And I love them. And I don't. Were you influenced by Twilight Touch? What?
Offended by Twilight stuff?
I know. I mean, I barely noticed it. You know, the scientist in me just thought it was so